All right. So, you know, um, recently there was that whole thing with Mark Zuckerberg, right? Testifying before Congress.
Yeah.
And he made this pretty bold statement about social media, claiming there's no link between using these platforms and any negative mental health outcomes in young people.
Yeah. I think a lot of us were, well, surprised to hear that,
Athletes.
especially given all the discussion we've been having about this very issue. I mean, you saw the reaction in the room.
Oh, yeah. It was palpable. Senators looking skeptical, parents there who were, you could just feel their emotion. It was powerful stuff. And it really highlighted the disconnect between what Zuckerberg was saying and what so many people are actually experiencing.
Right. It's like these two different worlds, those at the top running these massive platforms, and then the families, the individuals grappling with the very real effects.
For sure. And that's what brought us to this article in The Hill, written by Dr. Mitchell J. Prinstein. And it's important to note, right, this isn't just some random opinion piece. This is the chief science officer of the APA, the American Psychological Association. He's been researching this stuff, how social media affects young people, for years. So when he speaks, it carries some serious weight.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Meta, Zuckerberg's company, they actually cited the APA's own health advisory from 2023, the one on social media use in adolescents. They used it to back up Zuckerberg's claim that there's no link.
Which on the surface sounds kind of contradictory, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because Princeton, a top expert within the APA, he's saying that Meta basically cherry-picked the data from that advisory.
So that's what we're diving into today. What does this APA advisory actually say? And how does it connect, or maybe not connect, social media to what's going on with young people's mental health?
All right, so to be clear, Meta is using the APA advisory to say there's no direct cause-and-effect relationship. Like social media isn't the reason these negative things are happening.
Right, right.
But what Princeton is pointing out is that the advisory itself does acknowledge a relationship, a connection between using social media and experiencing psychological harm. They're not saying it's the only factor, but it's definitely in the mix.
Okay, so that's a subtle but important difference. And Princeton gets specific about the harms that the advisory actually identifies. Things like, online discrimination, hate speech, cyberbullying. This isn't theoretical stuff. This is actually happening on these platforms.
And then there's the content itself,
Yeah.
right? Stuff about self-harm, violence, eating disorders. How much of this is out there? How easy it is to find? That's another big worry the advisory brings up.
So if the APA is acknowledging this potential for harm, why is Princeton saying it's baked right into these platforms? What makes social media so tricky for young people? What's going on there?
It comes down to how their brains are developing. The advisory makes this point, too. Teenage brains, they're still under construction, right? The parts that control impulses, make good decisions, that stuff isn't fully formed yet. So certain features of social media, they kind of take advantage of that.
Can you give some examples? Like what kind of features are we talking about?
Think about something as basic as the number of followers, likes, shares. That constant feedback loop. The advisory talks about how that directly plays into a young person's desire to fit in, to be accepted by their peers.
Yeah.
It triggers a reward system in the brain, literally. Get those likes, get that dopamine hit, and you want more.
It's like this never-ending popularity contest. And for a teenage brain that's still figuring out who they are, that must be super intense.
Right, and then there's the endless scrolling, right? You just keep going and going. The advisory says this makes it really hard for young people to stop using the app. Those parts of the brain that say, okay, I'm done, they're not fully online yet, so it's harder to disengage to set limits.
I can see that. And there's the whole safety aspect too, right? With things like friending and direct messaging. While those can be good for connecting, they also open up risks, like, online predators targeting young people.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not just about feeling anxious or insecure. There are real dangers involved.
Yeah.
And another thing the advisory brings up is sleep. Being online all the time messes with sleep patterns, and that's especially bad for teenagers.
Oh, yeah, we all need our sleep. But for teenagers, it's crucial, right? For their mood, for how they do in school, for their brain development.
So for you listening, it's important to understand that it's not just one thing. It's the potential for emotional distress, the way these platforms are designed to kind of hook into a young person's brain, and then the actual physical consequences, like not getting enough sleep.
It's complicated.
It is. Now, to be fair, Princeton does point out that the APA advisory does mention some potential positives of social media,
Oh, right. There are some, for sure.
like connecting with others, finding support, especially for young people who might feel isolated or like they don't fit in. Online communities, they can be a real lifeline.
That's a really good point. If you're feeling alone in your everyday life, finding people online with shared interests, that can make a huge difference.
So it's not all doom and gloom. It's about understanding the nuances, the good and the bad. And this leads us to what Princeton says about what social media companies could be doing to reduce the risks.
What kind of changes does he suggest?
Well, first off, he talks about age-appropriate controls. Seems pretty basic, right? Making
Ah.
sure younger users have different settings, more protection than adults. He also says they need to do a better job of removing harmful content, which means better moderation, maybe even changing how their algorithms work.
That sounds like a tough one.
It is. But Princeton argues it's essential. He also thinks these companies should be more transparent with their data, make it accessible to independent researchers. That way, we can get a clearer picture of what's really going on.
Makes sense. More transparency would be good for everyone.
Right. And finally, he stresses the importance of education, teaching young people and parents about the potential risks,
Yeah.
digital literacy, online safety, how to recognize the warning signs if social media is becoming a problem.
So it's a multifaceted approach, right? It's not just about how users behave, but how these platforms are designed and run.
Exactly. And going back to what we talked about earlier, Princeton really emphasizes that crucial period of adolescent brain development.
Right, right.
Teenagers are wired for social connection and validation, but they're still developing the ability to manage their impulses, think long term.
Mm.
So these platforms, which are designed to tap into those very tendencies, they can have an even bigger impact during these years.
So if parents are thinking about just limiting their kids' access, Princeton is saying that's not enough.
Well, it can help, for sure. But his point is that the platforms themselves need to change. How they're built, how they work, it needs to be rethought with the mental health of young people in mind.
Which brings us to, I think, the core of the issue, this tension between wanting to protect young people and the whole profit-driven model of these companies, collecting data and all that.
Absolutely. Princeton is basically saying, what are your priorities? Are these platforms about maximizing engagement, getting as much data as possible, or are they actually concerned about the well-being of their young users?
Tough question, especially considering how hesitant these social media CEOs seem to be about supporting any real solutions in Congress.
Yeah, as Princeton points out, that resistance speaks volumes. It suggests that maybe the current business model is more important to them than actually protecting kids.
And his closing line is really powerful. He asks, how many more times will Zuckerberg apologize before real change is made? It's a call to action.
It is. It's saying that acknowledging the problem isn't enough. We need to see real, meaningful steps to prevent harm, not just apologize for it after the fact.
So to recap for you, looking at this article by Dr. Prinstein and the APA advisory, it seems pretty clear that there is a link between using social media and potential mental health challenges for young people. Maybe not a direct cause and effect in every case, but there are definite mechanisms at play, features of these platforms that can be especially risky during those teenage years.
Right. We talked about the risks of online harassment, exposure to harmful content, the way these platforms can exploit those reward systems in the brain, making it hard to self-regulate, and then the sleep deprivation issue, which is huge.
And while, yes, there are potential benefits, especially for young people who might be struggling to connect with others, the main takeaway here is that these platforms, as they're designed now, they pose some serious risks during a very vulnerable time in a young person's development.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to consider. Given all this, where does the responsibility really lie? Is it on the individual users, on parents, or is it on these tech companies to step up and do more to protect young people in this digital world?
It's a complicated question, but it's one we all need to be thinking about.
For sure.
It's the future of our kids.
Absolutely.
We need to figure this out.
Yeah, we do.
So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening, everyone.